So, um, this is going to be one of those contentious issues that is probably going to be divisive amongst a lot of people who might watch this, and that is minimalist shoes versus ultra padded arch support, oh my god, orthopedic nightmare shoes, right? And the thing about what really frustrates me about what is available as far as information goes is that there is nobody that is particularly unbiased one way or the other, that's actually looking and listening to what other people are saying and then responding to what's actually being said. There's a lot of straw man fallacies that are being presented on one side or the other without really acknowledging the overall issues being presented and trying to come up with an actual well-informed understanding of the pros and cons of each argument. And so I wanted to go ahead and try to approach that a little bit. And I'm going to point to one thing that really ticked me off in one person's video where they were discussing this. And this was a person that was, I think, either a physical therapist or a podiatrist, right? Where they were looking at this woman running on a treadmill and saying, I would never put this person into minimalist shoes because her running mechanics were so fucked up. And that he was afraid that if you put her in minimalist shoes, first of all, it wasn't going to immediately fix all of her biomechanical issues. But on the other side of it, she's gonna be fucked up no matter what with the way that she was running. And she was running in a higher elevated, well padded Nike running shoes. And so the problems that were existence that were going to lead to injury were there in the shoes that he would recommend. But then he was saying that, minimalist shoes will not address this problem. And he's right and he's wrong. So here's the thing, is that when we look at proper foot mechanics, what really needs to happen is that we want our toes generally pointing mostly forward. It's pretty common to have a little bit of external rotation to the foot, but we do want it to be generally running with our toes straight ahead through most of the motion. And the other thing is that we want to have our feet kind of staying relatively shoulder width apart. One of the issues that was in that particular video was like her legs were crossing, and some of that might have had to do with poor hip mechanics and maybe some overactivity in her adductors, things like that might be altering the way that she was running, that was making it more unsafe. And the other thing is that, so when we look at, one of the most common issues that people have with their feet is going to be that they have no real arch. And the reason why people don't have a natural arch is because they're developing with shoes that don't have an arch support, but they have this downward pressure from the wrappings that go over the foot and the laces tightening up and then pushing the foot to be flat. Well, of course, the arch is never going to actually develop. But even with people who actually do have an arch, transitioning to a minimalist shoe where you are encouraged to forward foot strike can be problematic as well, because there is a tightness in the plantar fascia that is creating and maintaining that arch, and now that you are forefoot striking, there's going to be a lot more flattening and springing in that tissue that is going to irritate that plantar fascia and potentially lead to plantar fasciitis. Other things that people need to consider before switching into a minimalist shoe, knowing that there's going to be more of a foot strike, are people who have conditions like Morton's toe. And so what that is in a normal foot, you would have basically the same length between your big toe and then the next toe. The metatarsals, the forward bones before the phalanges, should be about the same length without the next toe sticking out further than the big toe. And the thing about that is that when you forward strike, that metatarsal is going to be taking a lot more load and a lot more impact force, and it's not going to be well distributed amongst the big toe and its adjacent toes, right? It's just going to be hitting on that one, which is going to lead to a higher instances of injury, including fractures. So, Is running with minimalist shoes a good idea for you? Well, it really depends, and it also depends on your approach to adjusting to the minimalist shoes. There is plenty of research that suggests that minimalist shoes do not make you run faster, so that's not really a reason for doing it. But if you want to make sure that you have better biomechanics, well, you have to kind of address those basically joint by joint and try to understand where the problems are actually occurring. And that's going to require quite a bit of corrective exercise that has nothing to do with the footwear that you're wearing, right? So if you have feet that generally turn out and you have flat arches, well, then you need to start actually doing the corrective exercises to fix that flat arches. You probably do want to be maintaining using shoes that have very good orthotics or something like that, that create that arch while you're doing your homework in order to develop that arch properly before transitioning into a minimalist shoe. So what I mean by that is that you can do put a rag on the floor and you can scrunch it up with your toes, right? That's going to help develop that arch. You can do move that towel to the side, right? You can move it to the outside if you want to, right? You're pushing it around with your foot. You can do elastic band training where you take the band and you put it, if it was on my right foot, right, out in an angle this direction, and then I'll curl up and create that arch shape to exercise and pull my toe in the top of my foot up so that I get kind of this cocked angle here, so that I'm basically going from out to in and developing the anterior tibialis, the muscle that runs along the front of your tibia and then connects into that arch. So we're trying to develop the musculature that pulls you into that arch shape. And that's one of the things that people oftentimes don't do, is that they say, okay, well, I want to fix my arch, so I'm going to go into these minimalist shoes and I'm expect it to just magically happen. It doesn't just magically happen. You have to actually put in the work. The other thing that you need to understand is that oftentimes when people have flat feet, it is also exacerbated, if not caused, by tightness in the calf and or the peroneal longus, which is the muscle right here. That's the peroneal longus, right? So calf, peroneal longus. So we need to start doing different types of stretching in order to address the tightness in the calf, in order to prevent plantar fasciitis and other injuries when we start to transition into a minimalist shoe. So what I mean by that is also because I did have to deal with plantar fasciitis specifically, and so much of the focus goes right into the plantar fascia as far as the way that people generally talk about how to treat it. And the plantar fascia is not, becoming angry within a vacuum. It's because it is being put onto extra strain that it was not prepared for, right? So when you transition into a minimalist shoe, it's like going from being a complete couch potato your entire life and then immediately going into CrossFit and giving it 110%. What's going to happen? Well, you're going to get injured. You're not going to be prepared to be able to take that load, and you're not going to have the calcification of the bones that is needed in order to prevent those fractures. And if you're going into it with poor biomechanics that haven't been addressed, and I know I just talked about the ankle biomechanics, but flat feet and feet turning out can actually start in the hip. So if you have tight adductors, you have underactive glutes, that is going to create a knee valgus that is going to be associated with that foot turnout, which is going to exacerbate, again, the flattening of the foot. Pigeon toes, opposite problem, needs to be addressed in the opposite way. So you really want to make sure that you're doing the corrective exercise in order to make sure that you have proper biomechanics before you even transition. The other thing is that you need to get your body accustomed to that new running mechanic. And so what that's going to mean is like 6 months at least of just walking in the shoes, no running whatsoever. Being on hard surfaces, spending time on soft surfaces, making sure that you're not overdoing it with how much impact force. If your bones are not calcified to that, you might have stress from that. If you're not used to the motion that's happening in your arch, your plantar fascia is going to become grumpy with that. And so after that 6-month period of just walking, now you can start incorporating in a light jog to a medium jog. Then eventually you can work your way into, a faster jog, or later into running and whatnot. And you might want to start off on softer surfaces before going on to harder surfaces. So really, when you switch to a minimalist shoe, you have to understand that you are starting in a place of complete deconditionment because of the way that your feet have been coddled. And so there is a valid argument to say, well, if wearing these shoes that maintain your arch or give you a lot of heel padding and whatnot and encourage heel striking fixes your overall body mechanics and aren't causing you problems, there's not necessarily a great argument for switching over to a minimalist shoe, other than, okay, I want my body to do the work for itself. And that might be a very valid point. But if we were to really look at, okay, when is the best time to start using minimalist shoes, I would say that it is the moment that we start walking as infants, right? We want it to be a developmental thing where we are encouraging the body to develop its own natural arch to the foot, that we are wanting to encourage the body to learn from a very young age that as when we are lighter and less likely to create fractures in our feet and create ankle instability and problems like that, we want the impact to be happening in order to cause the calcification of those bones. We want to have that strengthening happening in the developmental phases, so that by the time you reach adulthood, your body has had all that time to adjust to it in a safe, healthy environment. Whereas, if you are getting closer to ages where osteoporosis becomes a concern, where you're losing mobility in your joints, that flexibility is harder to maintain, which happens as we get older. We just do not have the ability to stay flexible and calcify the way that we do, and we eventually get to this point where we're fighting osteoporosis. So, maybe it's not the greatest idea, when you are 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, just be like, I'm going to make the transition into minimalist shoes, because the risk is going to be getting higher the older that you get, versus, whether or not we're setting the stage from a very young age to be able to use and utilize the idea and the methodology or the philosophy behind minimalist footwear. So, again, I'm not really trying to tell you to use minimalist or not to use minimalist shoes. I really wanted this to be more of a fact-based discussion that lets you know about the considerations and managing the expectations if that was something that you were considering doing. And so I hope this is helpful. If you guys have questions, or if I missed a point that you thought that was absolutely critical, go ahead and put it in the comments. I'm happy to have a longer discussion about this. And yeah, we'll get you on the next one.